So it's doable. I think we just need to touch that center up.
Okay.
Touch the center.
That just tells me we got a lot of rolling to do on that one.
Yeah, but I think we could probably just jam it in close to where we are now.
Okay.
And fucking work.
Okay.
Alright, welcome back to the channel, everybody. In this video, I want to take some time and actually go through how we made these door skins, or the process we used in wheeling them out to gain the shape that was necessary to use them as a door skin. So I'm going to take y'all through that. Before I do, I want to thank Scott over at Whatever Garage for coming and spending multiple nights to help me figure this out and to basically just be that extra set of hands that I needed to actually wheel these out. Because they're so big, very difficult for me to operate through the English wheel by myself. So I needed a second set of hands. So, you know, neither one of us are metal masters. I've got quite a bit of experience on the English wheel with small stuff, nothing ever this big and such a low crown. So this was kind of a new experience to me. So I want to go through and give y'all a breakdown of how we did, or how we came about making these shapes in kind of a systematic fashion that hopefully will help you in your process if this is something you're trying to do. And by all means, if you know more than I do about this, feel free to mention it in the comments. Let me know if there's something I could have done differently or better. You know, feel free, let us know. And right now, let's just get into what we got going on. All right, so to begin with, something that may not be 100% necessary, but definitely comes in handy, is some sort of a radius gauge. Now I built this one using Bentech software, just kind of drew it out using all the lower anvil size, or most of the lower anvil size that I have, and the ones definitely that were in the range of what I needed to do this. So I made this radius gauge just out of a piece of aluminum. I've got them marked out and stamped just so you can see a little better there. But by doing that, we were able to determine what sort of a curvature or radius was necessary for the panels. And I've got that written down here on this piece of paper I've got. It's about a 48-inch radius going top to bottom. That's almost exactly what it is. And I'm guessing it's 60 because I didn't build it for that high because I don't have that low of a crown of wheel. But I'm guessing 60 this way because we don't have as much curve front to rear as we do top to bottom. But having one of these will help you check your progress, especially if you're making this off of something like a wireframe, or you know, maybe you don't have a part at all and you're just kind of coming up with what you're doing and you want to be able to match it from side to side. It's just a good idea to have this so you can kind of check your progress and see where you are in your shaping. Now, a couple other things I had made already from fixing the frames. If you watched episode 1, we noticed that this driver's door here had a very bad low spot on that lower front corner. So I had made a radius gauge to match the front of the passenger door so that I could tell you know, where we were. And this also comes in handy when we were working on trying to get our edges correct, as well as, you know, we got 2 edges here. The top is just blended over. There's no lip to fold or anything. So that just kind of went off the edge, and then we were going to cut off the excess. But on the bottom here, I've got this longer one that's pretty much the shape of the lower part of the door. And I did match these up to the car. I went over there and actually matched them up to make sure that we were in the right vicinity of what kind of curvature everything was supposed to have. So that's another good thing to have. You know, like I say, we had the original doors still together. I used those as the buck, so we had a very good a template to work by as we progressed through working it, so that when we were checking our shapes, we just stuck it right on the old door before I ever cut these off. So now, getting into the reason I have this piece of paper on here is to show you, you know, obviously if you have a flat piece of metal, you're going to be bringing shape into it. You're going to have to bring up the center. So you're stretching the metal through an English wheel. You're not shrinking it. All you can do is stretch it up. And so you'll notice I have this piece of paper stretched pretty tight. and you'll see here on the edges there's a lot of material that seems to want to be gathered up, almost if you have too much material. Now, if this was like a small part for like a motorcycle tank, something that has a lot of curve in it, you would typically go in and you would be making shrinks along the edge to tighten everything up, as well as doing some wheeling and stuff in the center. But since it's just such a low crown and the only thing we're going to be doing is English wheeling it, one of the things that kind of threw us for a loop is as we were making our shape, it would feel good through this area, but the edges would still be floppy like this, where we had too much material. And so it took us a little bit of time to figure that out. You know, we did a lot of YouTube University stuff to try to figure out what we were doing wrong. And there's a lot of great channels out there. Like I say, I've mentioned Cornfield Customs before, Make It Custom, Ray Shalene's Metal Shaping, Laze Metal Shaping. All those have great channels. All those guys have great channels on doing metal shaping stuff. It just wasn't 100% exactly what what we were doing here. So that's why we're trying to give you a little rundown on what we did. All right, so we finally kind of figured out what was going on. Even though it felt like we had shape in the middle, we were still floppy on the edges. And that's one reason why I have this piece of paper on here now, is to illustrate what was going on. Now, this piece of paper here started out just like the big piece of paper on the other door. And all I did was cut the center out, leaving about 1 inch on those 3 sides, a little more up here. But I haven't done anything to that piece of paper. It is just sitting on here with magnets, and you'll notice that the edges, they sit down nice and tight now. And what that's telling you is that you need to stay away from the edges as far as shrinking them or stretching them. The material along the edge is just fine to leave alone. And that was one of our mistakes, was we were wheeling too much out to the edge, and we were constantly putting shape on the edge and stretching the edge, when in all reality, since you're stretching the middle, in a sense, you're shrinking the edge essentially by just leaving it alone. So you're stretching everything inside and not the outer edge. All right, so now with the template removed, you can see the lines and the patterns we have drawn out on this door. Now, originally we had about 1 inch of excess all the way around. On top of what we have here, this has already been obviously trimmed and tipped. So we had excess material. So originally, you'll notice this border here that has no lines in it all the way around. Originally that was much wider. So we had about 2 inches all the way around that we just did not do anything with. And I believe some people call that like a picture frame method. And so our goal was essentially to wheel out the panel that we needed on the inside and then trim out the outside. And by leaving that much material, you can see there's quite a bit of material that we left alone in the wheel. We tried to keep our tracks out from going to that far edge because we didn't want to stretch the edge at all. We didn't want to mess with the edge. Now, as far as what we got going on in here, you'll notice I have some diagonal lines and I have some rectangles. Now, the point of these is to kind of systematically go through and stretch this panel up. It's a pretty general shape. You know, like I say, we're 48 inches or so in radius this way, a little more or a little less than that this way. So what we wanted to do was essentially stretch more in the center and not as much as we moved out. So our process was simple. We put the panel in and we started right here in the dead center of this, where the diagonal lines come across, and we put some tension on the English wheel. Now, we were using a 48-inch lower anvil, and that's the lowest crown anvil I could get a hold of for that wheel. And it doesn't have to be exactly the radius that you have. It just happened to be that I was using a 48. If I would have had a 60, I'd use the 60 to wheel the whole thing, because you don't need the exact same radius lower anvil as the shape you need. It's more about technique. You can do a lot with a low radius, with a low crown wheel, without needing something super high crown to make a super tight shape. You can do it all through the right technique using a low crown wheel. Hopefully I didn't confuse you on that, but we were using a 48-inch lower wheel, or whatever low crown wheel is all you really need. but the diagonal lines represent just a path for us to kind of eyeball and follow. So we would start in the middle, and we'd put some tension on the wheel, and we would keep our tracks tight. So we would make about 10 passes between just two of these diagonal lines here. But what we would do is we would work our way going back and forth all the way out to our largest rectangle. And then we would work our way all the way back across to the other corner and then back to the center. Then we would turn and we would follow the other diagonal path, and we do the same thing all the way out to the farthest corner, all the way back to the other farthest corner and back to the middle. And then we would add more tension. So when we added more tension, we would now do the same thing. We would follow our tracks in our diagonal pattern, and we go to the next smallest rectangle. And we would follow the same principle. We go far to the far corner, all the way across the middle to the other far corner, back to the middle. We would turn and we would go back out to this end, all the way back out to that end, back to the middle. And then we'd keep repeating that process. We'd add more tension, go to the next smallest rectangle, repeat the old process until we got to the smallest rectangle. And we would wheel all that out right to the center there and stop. And then we would check our progress and see where we were. Now, how much tension you have to put on the wheel is realistically just kind of is going to play out as you work the shape. We didn't want to put too much tension at one time because we didn't all of a sudden want to make a big bubble. And once we get too much shape into it, it's kind of I think you're probably at a point where you just need to throw it in the trash and start over. So we didn't put a whole lot of tension on the wheel. I was maybe going a third of a turn each time, and I marked the lower tensioner on the wheel with some different colored tape. So I only had 3 bars on the lower part, so I had yellow tape on one, green tape on the other one, and no tape on the last one. So I could kind of see and count how many turns we had on each pass. So, you know, if we had the green point in one direction and we did the entire thing, then I would turn it till the yellows point in that same direction, and we do the next smallest, and then we just rotate and rotate. And after about four times of us going through the entire process, we finally landed on a shape that was pretty close. And the only thing we would see is a little bit of that floppy edginess that we were discussing with the paper. And all that said was you need to bring the center up more. So we would go through the process again, and finally we had it to a point where it would sit on here. A couple of clamps would just lightly hold it down, and it would match the contours on all 3 sides. It would sit right across this upper lip just like it needed to be. And at that point we were happy. We knew we had got the shape in it. Now, because we were doing these sections like this, you could kind of feel a difference from those added tension amounts in each individual kind of block. So we had to come back and essentially planish it out, or kind of feather out the stretching in the wheel to get it all to blend out to where it feels, nice and smooth. So all we did on that process was reverse what we were doing. So where we stopped with the amount of tension on the center, we just simply put the panel back in right to the center. I put all the same tension we had when we finished, and then I would back off of that tension and we would wheel out to that next rectangle. And then we would back off a little more and we wheel out to the next biggest rectangle, and so on and so forth. And so essentially we were removing from that greatest tension that we had from gaining that shape in the middle originally, and we were backing off tension as we went through, and we just kept doing that. And if we felt a spot somewhere, we would kind of just work it a little bit, add a little tension if necessary, or take some away, and we would just work those areas until we got everything to feel like it sat on top of the door real nice. Especially since we had the original door skin on, we were able to sit it right on top, and we could kind of knock on it and you could tell where it's hollow, where it's not, does it feel right? And by having all that excess as well, we were able to, it didn't need to sit perfectly square to the door. We could shift it just a little bit and get it to where it fit just right. And then I took some Cleco's, the door skin down on top, straight through the edge of both of them. And at that point, we knew we had our door skins, and we were able to actually cut the old ones off. And if, like I say, if you watch the first video, they were off. I fixed the frames, and then we are now at the point where obviously they're on the door. They're tacked up through here. Now the edge isn't completely folded. I've got them just clecoed on, and we're tacked at the top here. But I want to put these on the car before I actually finish folding the edge. I want to make sure that we do have the shape, the outer shape correct. I don't want to end up with something weird and do a lot of work for no reason. I also don't want to finish weld all this for no reason and have to go back and fix something. So at this point, you know, like I say, they're ready to bolt up to the car, and we'll check our progress there. But I wanted to go through and give y'all an idea of how we did this. I think it's kind of a methodical way to do it. It was something I've seen people do with a power hammer, kind of making a roof skin. Same scenario, except it's not an English wheel, it was a power hammer. But that was the concept that he had, where it was Cornfield Customs, where he would start in the middle, and he would just essentially by the time you're done, you're working the middle multiple times, and you're just working less on the material as you move out to gain that low crown shape. So hopefully this helps somebody. You know, again, if you know anything, if you know of something I could have done differently or better, please let me know in the comments. I do want to thank Scott again from Whatever Garage for coming over and helping me a lot. And you're probably not going to see the last of him. He'll probably be back helping me do something else again. But hopefully this helps y'all out. If it did, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and tap that bell, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Oh yeah. Forgot to close my eyes that time. And drive home some spots.